Hi, everyone. Welcome to the Sprint Retro for Sprint 7. We're going to go over what went well, what to improve on, and get some actions items out of it. So I'll just go and share. Okay, can everyone see the right screen? Sweet. Okay, so I guess Tyler is kicking it off.
Yeah, I've said this a bunch to like in different contexts, different meetings, like over and over again. But it's worth reiterating and like writing down in a retro how much the new sprint schedule, bringing like the design system and CMS work together in one schedule, just like night and day. Like this was like so much easier to manage time. I felt like something I noticed very specifically is like there was a real rhythm to the sprint for me this time, where the beginning of last week was like planning, some synchronous meetings, like getting set up, moved into like working like in the mid and late week, did agency day work. And then the start of this week was a lot of like wrap up. I started to see more like either I was being asked to review things or other people were reviewing my MRs. And then by today, I felt like super wrapped up and like totally set on all the work that had set out to do. Whereas in the previous schedule, by like alternating those schedules, the rhythm wasn't as clear. So it was happening in both sprint cycles. So like I was winding down CMS, but I was also like revving up design system. And so there wasn't like, you didn't feel the rhythm the same way, or at least I didn't. So I don't know if other people felt that, but I just wanted to, again, thank Lauren and Michael for the thought on that and all the work into changing things. Also for Laura for doing all this calendar wrangling, which I know has been a handful. So thank you to that too. And yeah, I just think that the new schedule went super well. So that's my thoughts on that.
I think I'm next. So I just want to shout out to Tina for helping this morning doing some peer designing on the partners page hero. I was kind of stuck on something and she just like Wonder Woman right in there and with the correct answer, and it was awesome. And also I'm super stoked that we got access to Optimal Workshop, which is another user research tool. I've only got it for 1 month right now, but it's going to allow us to do this tree testing for the navigation, and we use it in conjunction with usertesting.com. So that's awesome. It's already started, and hopefully you'll just keep rolling with it. And Brandon, you go next.
Yeah, so I just wanted to say that it felt like the pricing page A/B test release felt smooth. I'm glad we didn't decide to release early on Friday for multiple reasons, but it's a good reminder to kind of give ourselves that extra buffer of time. Make sure things are validated very cleanly and clearly, and not in a rush. So, yeah, I was happy with how that worked out. And on to Hobby.
Michael is getting us Google Analytics access. That is all.
Sweet. I guess, do we want to jump into things that we can improve on? I think Tyler's up first also.
Yeah, we talked about this. We did a workshop on boards, and I wanted to bring some ideas back here to things to improve on, which is, one, how can we use boards better? So hopefully we can integrate them into sprint planning, and that will require no like extra work, just a change a little bit in how we're working, but resolve some challenges there. But the big thing for like I think the value there is the visibility into the workload and backlog, because I think that I know that I'm lacking clarity on what is in the backlog and like what even is there to do. So when we move into sprint planning, like, what should I choose? Like, or what is there that needs to be done in the prioritization that happens there? And I know that there's some board workflow that we need to resolve and iterate on and improve a little bit. So which flows into the next one, which is just I think we could get better at like issue weighting, but I wonder if this will come through better use of the boards. I know like starting out the sprint, I thought that maybe I would have too much on my plate, and then by like the middle of it, I was like, oh, I might even be done early. So, and I know time estimation like is always like there's no solution to it, right? It's like frequently the hardest part of software development, but I think doing a little bit more conscientious work about weighting and time estimation would be helpful for future sprints. Also related, I think, to the next thing is just like the agency day expectations. I think we've had some conversations in Slack, and I think down in the document about, and we talked about it last time about including agency day work in planning and releases. I thought that like if it was well contained to one day, I was like, we shouldn't include it. I have definitely changed my opinion because I just don't think any of this work will ever be contained to one day. But I think it's also useful to flag because I think maybe we should not, there maybe some expectations setting internally or like collaborating with other teams about like what does constitute agency day work and like what is an appropriate scope and like what are the implications for work outside of that day, because it seems to be, and from listening to other folks, like there are implications outside of that one day. So yeah, just things. I think that's about it. And Javi's up next.
I would like to have a backlog that's not just a text file on my own computer. I think this will go better with that discussion of trying to get like that situation, the board situation and issue situation kind of more sorted out. I think that will be more clear within like our new cadence. But there's like a point where kind of how Tyler was saying, like the sprint like tapers off the more stuff that you do, which is great because there's like things that I can do that are small, but I wish there was like kind of like a prioritization of that done beforehand, just so that like after I finish the work that I said I was going to do this sprint, I have other things by order of importance rather than just like, oh, like let me do these things that I've been putting off that I don't know if they're super important or not, but like I'm going to do them. Next is Lauren.
I think issue and milestone management could go better. And this is partly my own fault because when I was started on the CMS and previous, our team was much smaller and it's grown substantially. But I assigned most of the issues to myself and then set my own milestones, kind of doing a work back schedule. And because of that, my sprint boards were really scary. And so I just didn't look at them because it was like, oh, how's that? No. So I've recently gone back and like assigned all of those CMS issues that I created that haven't been worked on or aren't getting worked on currently to the inbound marketing backlog label and unassigned them because our team is much bigger and more people can work on these issues other than just myself or Brendan. And so I'd like to propose, and we can iterate on this, but that we only set milestones to issues when they're actively being worked on or plan to be worked on during that milestone.
I just want to say I've had kind of a similar experience. Similarly, my milestones, I planned out months in advance and it wasn't working because you never knew what you were going to be working on and how much time and all that. And so I kind of came to a similar conclusion as Lauren for myself personally. One of the things that I have been doing is basically, now that we're using epics more clearly as a bucket of work, as opposed to like, here's where we are, here's where we want to go. It's more of like, here's all the things related to this. I'm almost using epics kind of like a board, right? Like I know this sprint, we want to be working on the CMS. So I'll pull up the CMS epic and look at the work that it remains to be done and start working on it that way. I know that's not ideal and that's not where we want to go necessarily. And we need to evaluate boards in our workflow, but that's just, I figured I'd put in my 2 cents of how I've been working lately. And I appreciate what has been done with the epics. So I just figured I'd mention those 2 things.
I had a follow-up just to what you said. That's an interesting, I never thought of doing it that way, but I would be interested to play around with the idea in terms of setting epics in regards to sprints as so much like bodies of work that are, like need to be structured out, just because I think it makes more sense to the work that we do and it's easier to organize that information. But yeah, we can have like a broader discussion of that, maybe during the call, after the call, I don't know, just thoughts that I had.
I want to reflect that too, just that what Brendan said, that's exactly how I've been planning my work, is through epics and all the issues that are contained in the epic. So I think it's worth exploring further. Am I next? I'm next. This is kind of a classic problem to solve, but Figma file delivery and handoff to engineering could be a little bit smoother. And I'm realizing now that we're a new team and we've never actually had this discussion. So I think it's going to be a really easy thing to solve. And I'm volunteering myself to either create a survey or a workshop or something like that to solve that.
I think it also, I think that's a good idea. It's also kind of reflective of not only our team size and that we're growing, but also like where people are at different points in their careers and who they've worked with and stuff like that. So it's always good to have these discussions as a team comes together and grows.
I added a comment onto that one because I'd also really love to know like what is and what isn't working from the engineering side. Because I kind of realized I wasn't adding readmes to the agency day work just because it was already taking so much time, and then to write a readme would take more time. Obviously, if that's something we need to do, then I should be doing it. But if it's not something that people are utilizing, then I won't do it. So it would, yeah, just be helpful to know like what is working and what's not working.
I think we definitely have to iron that out because I'm realizing that once an agency day project gets reassigned to whomever is building it, sometimes it's in a new issue and can't be expected to read all of the conversations that happened in the wireframe or design issues. So we need to find a way to pull those key pieces of information out. Next is Jess.
Yeah, so I just had a lot of last minute changes this sprint. My original plan for the sprint was to do navigation work, and I only got to do one day of that. So I don't think it was like any particular fault. It might have just been like a weird sprint, but we had like the pricing page changes that were all of a sudden, and then the agency day work took too long, and then another agency project got turned into a normal project and got prioritized. So I don't really know what to do about that, but it just obviously was not what I was planning to do. And so it's hard to it was hard to plan for something when so many changes are coming at you and so many priorities are shifting so quickly. So I just thought I'd call that out. Javi, I think you're next.
But he's not at his desk, it looks like.
He's gone.
So he's asking, should handbook contributions be a more regular occurrence? I encourage everyone to contribute to the handbook. I know that it's a bit of a where do I start sort of a situation, but we can all definitely review the digital experience team page, even the inbound marketing page, and just go over and look at things that may be clear, unclear, working with the website too. And right now, I'm particularly saying this to the engineers and also the Slippers repo. But now that the designers are getting those how to get lessons and work in the repository, it'll be great to have you all contributing too on these handbook pages. I know that it's kind of a last thought to contribute to documentation, like you got to build the things, but it's always important to set aside some time. This is partially why I was working on that Figma file workshop exercise for myself of, how do I prioritize certain things in my schedule like documentation. So yeah, definitely can encourage people to contribute to the handbook. And now Javi is back.
I also found, just to play off of that a little bit, and it's in my action items. Yesterday, I had a question about sprint stuff for our team, and I was like, oh, I'll ask this in Slack. And I was like, oh, I'll make an MR about it and like put my questions in the MR and like ask people about it there. And I wonder if hope that process maybe helps in terms of like getting more handbook updates and like entries and stuff, and the handbook first thing. Because we don't want to use Slack as a document of record, right? We want to because that stuff is supposed to expire and it's gone in 90 days. So you shouldn't assume you'll be able to go back and get the answers there. So yeah, I think starting with and we talked about this too in the boards, start with the MR. So if you've got a question about stuff that needs to be permanently answered, make an MR about it.
Hello, I'm back. Just for context, my fire alarm went off, so I was trying to figure all of that out. I imagine I'm next. Probably talking about contributions to the handbook and trying to figure out how to make that more of a regular occurrence. I think that there's a lot of times where it's like, we should document this, and it ends up just like being left in an issue. So maybe if there's, I think we've talked about this a little bit with our board discussion about like the deliverables for things being contributions to the handbook. I think that would solve itself, but I still wanted to call that out explicitly because that's something that I've been thinking about, because things often get out of date really quickly with the handbook. And so trying to figure out what that looks like. I also have the next point on like kind of the question of if people are aware that our agency days are only like we're planned to only be on Friday. My instinct is to say that that's not super clear because of the expectations that I think other people have, and based on like how we've been working outside of our own regular agency days to get work done. It also feels like, generally speaking, on Fridays, people are less responsive on the stuff. So it's like, if we're leaving the things on Friday and no one's responding to things, it's like kind of hard to get things out the door that same day. But that's been my experience. Yeah, in terms of that, I'd like to hear people's thoughts.
I agree. I spend a big chunk of today planning for my agency day work tomorrow. That's happening tomorrow. Basically all today was meetings and planning for agency day work.
Yeah, and that's, go ahead.
Okay, yeah, I was just gonna say similarly, a lot of my agency day work hasn't been over the right Friday. Like we're only supposed to do it every second Friday after a sprint is finished, like tomorrow. But I also noticed that a lot of the parts that come in on my agency work, the content and the photos and the assets and the whatever, they also were given tomorrow to do it. Like, so now I'm like ready to build a page and there's just nothing there for me because everyone has the same due date. But I need that stuff before I kind of start building it. And then we start getting these back and forths and it drags on for a few more days. So I've definitely noticed that also.
I will add to that. It came up with the campus page last Friday. I looked at it and I saw that Tina had like just finished the issue like that morning, and there was a huge thread of information to go through, and it's like, okay, no, I'm not gonna, like, I need more than 1 hour of that this morning. So
it relates a little bit to handoff as well with agency day work, and half the time we don't know who's building it. So
And then I was just going to say also, when I did that exercise that I mentioned earlier, planning my calendar out for kind of the sprint and, blocking out times and stuff like that, I realized that it's not just that agency day is Friday, right? It was hinted at earlier. Basically, you go to release something and you need a review and no one's there to review it. So the date slips to, first thing Monday. Assuming that there aren't revisions to be made, right? Like if it goes through design review or code review Monday morning and then it's got to make code changes, then you got to do it again. So realistically, agency day is not you're working for the whole day. It's you're spending that Thursday afternoon prepping, which is not ideal, but that seems to be what we're all doing. Friday morning, you go to get started, middle of the day, Friday, maybe you send it for review and then it gets reviewed. So like basically you only have a quarter of a day at most to do that agency work. And if to Lauren's point, you get your stuff to start on Friday, then you're also behind that quarter of a day where you were planning on Thursday or however long you do. So I don't know that 1 day is a realistic number for agency day. I think it's a realistic amount to limit it, but it may just need, every project may need multiple agency days to get done. So that's my final thought on that.
I agree with that. The weighting is not accurate on all of the agency tasks that were assigned to me. For example, for tomorrow, I have a wireframe for commit and a design for a net new page. You can't really do both of those things in 1 day.
I think like Brandon, you said something there about like appropriate, like a day may be an appropriate amount of time, but it's not I think that blocking off one specific day to do the work is also not like async first. right? And saying like, oh, like agency day work happens here. It's like not great for us because it puts us in this weird place where like information gathering, execution, and review has to happen in one day. It's also not good for people who want this work completed because like I'm out tomorrow. So like I'm like right now it's like, oh, I can't take an agency day issue, but I certainly could have. Like I could have fitted into my sprint work, right? And so maybe if we like maybe we can resolve this without making extra work for anyone by like instead of saying we reserve this work to be done on these days, we say like, you know, each person on this team has one or two sprint points that they can allocate to agency work and then deliver it on the same sprint schedule.
I think that
I'm
that
gonna
idea
add,
might. Oh, go ahead.
what I just want to add, who works consecutively for like a full day of work on one task? I don't. I bounce around from thing to thing. So for me to stay focused on one thing for 8 hours in a single day is hard for anything.
Yeah, so I think there's definitely room for improvement here, and you know everyone's got a different workflow. Personally, if I can't put an item on my calendar and block out all other things, then I cannot be focused on that one thing. So like I would not get any agency day work done unless it was on agency day. I didn't set this theory up that we've been working, but it's been working out for me, but I totally get why it's not working out for some of y'all. And so their flexibility is always an appreciated thing. So I think we can improve there. And just because we have agency day reserved doesn't mean we have to do the work on agency day, to Tyler's point. For me,
I like that it's all one day. I just think the scope, or if it's not on one day, the scope of it creeps quickly to much more than one day.
Cool. So it sounds like we have a lot to review for agency day and sprint boards and other things. I don't want the call necessarily to go on too much longer because I know we all have things to do, but if there are any closing thoughts on this or any other topics that we want to discuss, great, let's hear them. Otherwise, looks like I'm getting some blank stares and nodding heads for the moment. So I think we can probably wrap things up and take some more discussions async and off the video and whatnot. So thanks again, everyone. Good to hear from you.